I came to investigate monuments in Wales in 1973, having spent a couple of years in enforced study of 19th century antiquarian manuscripts in the Royal Irish Academy, Dublin. Just to remind us. Civil disturbance had made it too dangerous to travel around central Ulster, where my postgraduate field survey should have been focused. This Irish antiquarian experience gave me a taste for the excitement of armchair discovery. Excuse me. So having gained an appreciation of how manuscript sources could usefully illuminate the histories of ancient monuments, I was anxious to apply these enthusiasms and methodology to the work of RCHMW. Such antiquarian activity had not previously been to the taste of the Commission's outgoing secretary, the Hillfort and survey specialist, Dr. H.A. Hogg. He believed Crown investigators should record only what they could see with their own eyes, rather than rely upon accounts of what others thought they may have seen. My arrival coincided with his departure, and as I'm sure he'd tell you himself, Hogg's successor, the architect-historian Peter Smith, tended to share that sceptical view of those who went before. My first assignment was to help document lists of sites for field visits in Breconshire as part of the production of inventories describing prehistoric and Roman monuments. Inventory making was the task with which the Commission had originally been charged in 1908. It took me hotfoot to the National Library, seeking a copy of Theophilus Jones's County History of 1805-9 and sight of any corroborative or complementary unpublished accounts describing ancient features lost or eroded. This quest soon brought me into contact with the manuscripts of 18th century tourists seeking after the picturesque, together with topographical drawings and local historians and early archaeologists' papers. From a cursory view, Theophilus Jones's deposited manuscripts seemed to add little to the text of his printed volumes, but complementary material emerged from another hand, that of Archdeacon Henry Thomas Payne. 3 manuscript volumes of his had been deposited in 1937 by 2 Jones sisters living in Llanbedr Rectory near Crickhowell. As Payne had died at Llanbedr in 1832, and the Mrs. Jones were daughters by a second marriage of the second incumbent to succeed him, the connection looked promising. So having read Payne's manuscripts at the library, I wrote asking the Mrs. Jones if I may quote from them. The septuagenarian Miss Beatrice Eveline Jones promptly explained that she owned further items that may be of interest, and although she had recently lost her sister, I was welcome to visit and examine them. So I visited Llanbedr Rectory and read Henry Thomas Payne's manuscripts there before a maple log fire in his study in what was rapidly becoming a compelling inquiry. All this happened within a matter of weeks of my arrival at the Commission, where, unsurprisingly, expressions of concern were by now being raised about my activities. Was I perhaps exhuming materials that were already well known, had already been used by archaeologists, or even been evaluated by Britain's then only historian of our subject, Glendaniel? Although Britain's leading authority on the story of archaeology's development, thankfully, he had never looked at Wales in any detail. Although online databases were then unknown, the National Library was well equipped with card indices and hand lists to its manuscript holdings. So it was soon possible to find connections between Theophilus Jones, Henry Thomas Payne, a host of Welsh scholarly correspondents, and the well-known antiquarian scholar and archaeologist Sir Richard Colt Hoare of Stourhead in Wiltshire. Glendaniel had certainly written about him. Colt Hoare had dug many, perhaps too many, barrows on Salisbury Plain and published them under the pious epithet, "We speak from facts, not theories." An investigation into Colt Hoare's Welsh activities thus became respectable and acceptable among my new colleagues because Colt Hoare was known to Glendaniel, and Glendaniel was a Welshman who had taught my line manager. While much fascinating information emerged from these investigations during the mid-70s, unfortunately it was not then published, as my findings were never central to the Commission's work, and over the years I was given other duties. Furthermore, life outside the Commission presented even more serious distractions for the next 35 years after I met a lady studying picturesque tourist literature over a National Library of Wales library desk in autumn 1974. Thank you for all your help, my dear. I have only recently returned to that research and welcome the opportunity to summarise its temporary findings here as a piece of research in progress. The story is basically about a rich English landowner who at the end of the 18th century neglects his estate managerial duties to enjoy exploring Wales and who is slowly seduced by the idea of producing well-illustrated scholarly topographical books. Having met like-minded men in Wales, he encourages them to research and supports their publications by furnishing them with excellent engravings based on accurate topographical drawings from his own hand. This figure, already mentioned, was Sir Richard Colt Hoare, the second Baronet Hoare. His family money came from Hoare's Bank, now Coutts & Hoare's. Classically educated at home and trained for the family firm, coming of age brought him £2,000 a year. His marriage in 1783 to Hester Littleton of Hagley Hall, Worcestershire, lasted but 2 years as she died, leaving him his heir, the only son, in 1784. He never remarried. This is his home. He never remarried, but immediately inherited Stourhead, the well-known family seat, set in a remarkable designed landscape. Thenceforth, he severed all links with the bank, except as a customer. Now bereft, but among the richest men in the land, he needed, quote, new scenes and new occupations to detach his mind from melancholy reflections, unquote. So for 10 years, he travelled on the continent. At first, this is not him exactly, but someone like him crossing the Alps. At first, for 6 years to Rome and Naples. And these are tourists looking at Rome. When he visited all the classical sites and immersed himself in the landscape, all the time drawing, recording, and collecting for his house and portfolio. And this is the Claudian Aqueduct, also in Rome. Then, after 1788, he crossed the Low Countries on a return trip to Italy to see Etruscan and Greek sites. Both explorations brought him a rare understanding of European art and ownership of several great Italian masters. And this is the villa of Myconus at Tivoli by Piranesi. Most importantly, on these visits, he developed his own accurate style of drawing, a skill indispensable to his future topographical interests in Britain. And this is one of his early pictures in North Wales. After 1792, continental travel was closed by the French Revolutionary War, and in common with other cultural tourists, Colt Hoare had to turn his back on Europe. Instead, he investigated Britain, all the while keeping meticulous diaries detailing what he had seen, drawn, and sometimes even what he had eaten. In Wales, he particularly commented on fried breakfasts of bacon and egg. After 1791, each spring he set off, and in 1806 he toured Ireland. But in common with a growing number of contemporary polymaths, for him Wales held a particular fascination. He was called not only by its picturesque landscape, medieval ruins, British and Roman antiquities, but also by the sublimity of its developing industry. Before eventually embarking on his antiquarian excursions and taking on a Welsh property in 1804, Colt Hoare spent the 1790s fishing. His fishing diary is a unique record of lake habitats across Gwynedd. This is the area in which he fished. And some of these are now protected as SSSIs, and others are probably damaged by acid rain. More remarkably, his record shows a man turned 40, unflinchingly undertaking some of the stiffest walks in the British uplands to access its remotest lakes.